Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jadley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the oh-so-beautiful neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, CastBox, Player FM, Boomplay, Ghana, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have two really fascinating guests today. Angie Cruz is here to celebrate Angelica and La Guira. And later in the show, Zeba McGibbon will be here to celebrate her Caring Critters series. As I said, these two women are fascinating. You do not want to miss a moment of this episode of Reading with Your Kids. This episode is brought to you by Daphne Draws Data. From the imaginative mind of best-selling author Cole Nussbaumer Knaflick and the vibrant illustrations of John Skewers comes a story that will captivate kids and grown-ups alike. Daphne is not your ordinary dragon. She doesn't breathe fire. She breathes life into numbers, turning them into pictures that solve mysteries, forge friendships, and save the day. Daphne's journey celebrates unique talents, the power of teamwork, and the beauty of seeing the world through a different lens. This dragon's tale is perfect for parents and educators to inspire the next generation of curious minds and innovative thinkers. Get your copy today. Daphne Draws Data. Hey, my friends, when should you start to talk to your kids about money? Well, if you ask me, I would say as soon as possible. Helping our kids become financially literate is so very important. And thanks to owningthedash.com, talking to your kids about money and finances is easier than ever. Anthony Delaunay is a financial dad-visor and the founder of Owning the Dash, LLC, an organization dedicated to promoting childhood financial literacy and family financial freedom. Delaunay has written a series of award-winning children's picture books that each teach basic lessons about money. He has also authored two financial self-help books geared towards helping young couples start their financial journey and towards helping older couples prepare for their transition into retirement. Owning the Dash empowers families by providing books, games, and activities that introduce fundamental financial lessons in a fun and engaging way, encouraging kids to think about certain scenarios and how they might respond, and help prepare kids for when they have to make important money decisions later in their life. All 5 of Anthony's books have been named Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Reads and would make a great addition to your family library. To learn more, please visit owningthedash.com. Join us right now from New York City. Our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new children's book. It's called Angelica and Laguida. Please welcome to the show, Angie Cruz. Hey, Angie, how are you?
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I am delighted to invite you. The Guida is phenomenal. I have a love for the Guida, but tell everybody what it is before we talk about the book.
Well, I'm very curious about how you know the instrument and why you love it. But the book, Angelica and Laguida, is a book about a little girl who had just spent her summer in Dominican Republic with her grandparents. And right before she leaves, her grandfather gives her a family heirloom, which is an old Guida that has been passed to her from generation to generation. And she brings it to New York excited because her grandfather tells her, if you play this instrument, you will never be alone. We will always be with you. But when she gets to New York and she tries to play it at home or at school, everyone's like, oh no, what is that sound? And they kind of ask her to play it somewhere else. And she gets very frustrated because she loves this instrument. She loves her family in DR and she wants to play it. And she finally goes outside and sits by herself with the instrument and remembers all the sage advice she received from her elders and plays it for herself and realizes that you can play music just for you. And when she does that, suddenly all the different musicians of the community come to her and say, can I play with you? And she starts playing with, different, with someone who's playing the trombone and someone who's playing the tambora. And they start kind of this, makeshift band, and it becomes a block party.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, for folks who don't know what a guida is, tell us about the instrument itself.
Well, it's shaped like a tin can, like a large elongated can. And the sides of it is like a cheese grater, scratchy surface. And you scrape it with a metal comb. So, if you hit it the wrong way, it could sound like nails on a chalkboard. But if you know how to play it, it actually has this really wonderful percussion beat that most merengue típico, all merengue típico music and lots of Latin American music now have incorporated into their sound. And the scratchy surface that goes that sound, actually, the person holding the guida sort of speeds up the music and slows it down. So if you're dancing to merengue and you suddenly feel it moving a lot faster, that's probably the guida player, like really feeling the crowd.
Yeah, yeah. The guida is special, near and dear to my heart. I'm actually just coincidentally, I'm wearing my Clowns Without Borders T-shirt. Clowns Without Borders is an organization that sends artists around the world to people in refugee camps and disaster areas, or to go and bring a smile to people who've been internally displaced due to violence or crime. And I had the pleasure of performing with Clowns Without Borders in El Salvador during the month of November last year. And I brought down my guida, and we started every one of our shows with me leading a little procession to the beat of the guida.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it really got everybody in the crowd going and got our show off to a really super start. So
I love that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's an instrument that I wasn't really familiar with until I married my beautiful wife, who's originally from Puerto Rico. So we became, I was introduced to all, many different genres of music, and some of my favorite artists right now, like Juan Luis Guerra and Carlos Vives, are, play and utilize that instrument in all of their music.
Yeah, I grew up listening to Juan Luis Guerra, and and as a child, like, this music just became synonymous to me as like being at home. So for me, like, being, I actually wrote this book during pandemic where we were all isolating in place, and for me, like, music became a way to stay connected to people I love. And in some ways now, in retrospect, that the book is out, I'm like, oh, of course. I was dying for more joy. I was dying for more community at the time. And this book, maybe, I was just starved for that. And I think that the book in some way came out of this desire to connect us and to connect myself with what's important to me.
Yeah, yeah. Was there one thing in particular that inspired you to write this book?
Again, it was just this moment where, first of all, I have a son, right? I have a 16-year-old son. He's not a child anymore, but I started to read children's books when he was a kid. Like, I didn't grow up reading children's books. And, throughout my life, when I had to buy one or I had to engage one, they were kind of like me going to the library and checking out this world that I didn't really know or have a strong affection for because it wasn't part of my formative years. Mm-hmm. But when I had a son, I really wanted him to be a reader. I wanted him to love books as much as I did. So I bought many children's books, and I was always at the library with him. And I started to read, and I realized, I was like, oh, wow, there aren't that many books. This was back in 2007 to 2011. 2008, when he was still reading picture books, I was like, there aren't that many books representing Latinx community. And I said, somebody should do something about it. And at the time I'm primarily an adult fiction writer. That's what I do. And I like writing novels. As you know, like I've written, numerous novels before about the Dominican community. And I said, let me do it. Let me try and write a picture book, that would make sense at this moment of my career. And, another reason too, is because every time I have a reading, a lot of parents come with their kids and they ask me to sign my adult books for their kids. And I thought, why not try to write a book for that generation? So when that young reader comes to my reading with their mother or father, they also get a book.
Yeah. Great idea. I love that. I love that a lot. Obviously, you're very proud of your Dominican heritage. Tell us a little bit about the Dominican Republic and that culture. I think one of the things that I noticed when I married my beautiful wife is that everybody they hear the word Latin America and they think it's the culture is the same from Mexico all the way down to the tip of Argentina and all the Caribbean islands, but in reality, all those cultures are very, very different and unique and beautiful.
Well, it's funny because I actually lived in Texas for 6 years. And when I was there, a lot of my students assumed Dominican Republic was part of Mexico. Like, in a way that the Caribbean is not, I guess, taught as much, right? Because they're near the border. So like their concerns are more South American. And, growing up in New York, like there's not that much I knew about South American history or Latin American history from being until I went to college. So I think that it's not unusual for people to be confused because we do have a lot of gaps in our education, and we definitely have a lot of gaps in the way that we're represented in the movies and TV. Like there's this pan-Latinization where no one really sees how different our cultures are and how different our histories are. Dominican Republic is in the Caribbean. It shares an island with Haiti. It has a very tumultuous and violent history and relationship. It continues to be that way. And I think, for me, like, it's always difficult to celebrate even the United States, any community that we know is in conflict with a lot of my ideals. But I want to say, like, for me, like, also Dominican Republic, I was born and raised in New York City, in a neighborhood called Washington Heights, which is represented in the book, predominantly with Dominican immigrants who were speaking in Spanish. Mm-hmm. So that is my childhood, right? And in my childhood, I was sent back and forth to Dominican Republic because as part of my, care, there was my grandmother, my tias, who lived in the Dominican Republic that helped my mother, who for the most part was raising me as a single mom. So this back and forth to Dominican Republic made Dominican Republic for me in my childhood very real and special. I always kid around and I say, because we were flying back and forth so often back then that, for me, like, I felt like I was in one kitchen, but two different countries. Because sometimes the same cast of characters were in the same kitchen. Mm-hmm. Even though we were in different countries. So to write about this culture and this kind of fluidity between this culture and New York City and Dominican Republic, sometimes Dominican Republic felt closer to me than going downtown Manhattan. Mm-hmm. Because Washington Heights is on the uptown side of the island. So that's really my connection. And I would say Dominican Republic is, again, it's island, it's Caribbean. It's hot all the time. It's susceptible to hurricanes. And I think music and dancing, was something that was taught to me through that culture. And I'm really proud of that part of it.
Yeah. Beautiful. It's interesting that your childhood sounds very much like the childhood my wife describes me, going back and forth between New York City and then when she moved to Boston, back and forth from the States down to Puerto Rico. And And it's kind of wonderful that she has that connection, a real connection, with Puerto Rico and with her family there. When my grandparents immigrated from Ireland, they said goodbye, and I never even looked back. So I know more about El Salvador and Central America and Puerto Rico than I know about Ireland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's farther away. It's harder, right? Mm-hmm. It's more difficult to get there. I mean, Dominican Republic is, 3 hours away from New York City, and they're direct flights. I think there's no time difference. I think, like leaving a place like Europe, it probably, and, in lots of parts of the world, you're just like, oh, I might never be able to go back. And I feel fortunate that I had a connection, and my curiosity always came from, learning more, because even though my family left Dominican Republic and returned, I feel like we still never really talked about why we had to leave, which is really why I write so much, or I research so much and think about so much about why people have to leave in the first place, right? Like, it's not just we want a better life. Like, that's like the narrative that we're told, but it's also like we were forced to leave, right? Like, there are ways that we're forced to leave because of poverty and all of these different things. And, but even in all those challenges, again, I feel like what I love, and I love this, about lots of different cultures that have sort of said goodbye to their land. The nostalgia, someone says nostalgia is poison because it just keeps taking us back to this place that we can no longer go to. But in some ways, I was thinking about nostalgia as a way to almost have a rope tying you to something that matters to you on a physical level, right? Like, music to me feels very nostalgic, but without music, I don't think I would be reminded so much of how real and present these realities around the world truly are. Right? Like, when Juan Luis Guerra sings, Ojalá que llueva café en el campo, this is one of his famous songs. I'm sure you heard it. Ojalá que llueva café en el campo.
Yep.
You're dancing to it or whatever. But what he's also saying is, I hope it rains coffee. Like, our people are desperate, and I think those things live together, right? Like, and I feel like this book represents a lot of that. Like, Angelica and La Guira, like, she's feeling this deep sadness and grief because she can't be with the people she loves, because now she's in New York City, right? But she also can bring joy into her heart and family by playing their music.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things I think that your book, when we talk about books having the power to be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, and of course, being able to see yourself portrayed positively in the page of the books is a wonderful thing. And I think that Angelica and Laguida, it gives non-Dominican families a way to kind of look in and learn about the culture. But one of the things I really hope that families talk about as they're reading this book with their kids is the fact that Angelica is a human being, and she had to leave her home, just like millions of other people have to leave their home. And so wherever you stand on the issue of immigration, I really hope that we remember that what we're talking about are people who deserve to be respected and loved. And I hope that's something kids can learn through your book.
I mean, I think, what I love about being a writer is that sometimes I'm writing a book for little me, like little Angie. And then I realize, oh my God, I'll meet someone in Colorado who says, and they're like a different age completely. And they're like, oh my God, I read this book and it's my story. And someone else who's like, I've never been to DR. I don't even know that much about it. And this is my story. And I feel like that's what great books do. Like, I grew up reading books, James Joyce was one of my, I would say my earliest and most significant figures in my writing. And it makes sense, right? He's writing about working class people. I grew up in a working class home. And I think that a book like Angelica and Laguida is like I already have heard from readers, and I love when people are just like, I read it to my kid and oh my God, we ordered a guida and they want to learn and, how to play this instrument. And it's a very accessible instrument in a way that, easy, small, you could play it. But also, reading is about learning about what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Angelica's just like a really, like, in my mind, I feel she's so joyous. I actually, as far as the process of writing a book, I wrote this book 4 years ago, right? Like, so you write the book for any picture book writers out there who want to write picture books. You send the text to the publisher. And then like 4 years later, after the illustrations have been done, which is a long process,
Mm-hmm.
the book comes out. And when I looked at the illustrations, because I have to say, Luz Batista, first picture book, I'm sure it won't be her last, did such an incredible job at capturing community and joy. And also like affection toward, family members and toward this instrument. And when I looked at it, I said, oh, wow. Like I was reading it and getting happy about going out there and listening to my voice. Because this book is really about voice, right? Like the guida represents the thing about us that lots of people don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense, Jed?
It does. It does. Yeah. Yeah. This is, I agree with the illustrations are just, beautiful. And they're so, and that's why I was lost. I was looking at the cover art. And it, Angelica just has, the illustration, she's radiating joy.
I know. I mean, of course, I didn't do that part. I just wrote the words and Luz infused it. And, I just learned from Luz Batista that while she was drawing these, she had recently lost a grandparent.
Oh.
So the book actually helped her work through her grief. And I thought, oh my God, like the book does feel emotional, big emotions, right? You have the joy, you have the sadness, you have the longing, you have the determination, you have the discipline, right? Like she's like, I'm going to play this, even if everyone tells me I can't play it well.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to keep trying.
Yeah. I'm curious, Angie, was the process of letting go of your manuscript and placing it into the hands of an illustrator and then backing off and not having any control over that part of the story, was that difficult for you?
No, I actually, and I guess it's because I have a lot more experience with writing, but I do realize, when I was trained as a writer, I kind of believed that I was going to be all on my own, right? We have this idea that we're individuals that have to do everything ourselves, right? Everything is about like this individualistic way of thinking. But, I've been leaning more and more as I get older to this idea that no, we're interdependent. I grew up in an interdependent home where everyone chipped in and helped me become the person I am. And in the end, I find out that most people got help. Mm-hmm. Most people get help, financial advice, whatever. So when I look at this process of collaboration, I think about it, oh, wow, we're all in this to win, mm-hmm. right? We're all in this to succeed. We all want it to be a beautiful book. So when I let go of the book and I give it to my editor and then they give it to the art director and the art director works with the illustrator and then the book is given to the marketing and publicity team, I think we're all in this together. Yeah. And what we feel, what we think, I can't take it personally. I listen and I say, okay, yeah, we all want this to be the most beautiful and successful book possible. And it isn't hard anymore. I think when I was a younger writer, maybe my ego was bigger, but like as you get older, I think that you check your ego and you learn, put yourself aside and listen to what people are really saying and take it in. So the work is better.
Yeah.
The work could become better.
Yeah. Well, I love that your book celebrates that community. I also love that it celebrates the intergenerational friendships and relationships. I think that's so important. And I think it's something that a lot of families here in the States, because we're so spread out and apart, aren't able to enjoy.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
I think, I read a book of when my son was a child. It was called Hold On to Your Kids. And I remember reading this book about what does it mean to be peer-oriented versus elder-oriented, right? And I was raised elder-oriented. Even if I didn't agree with my elders, their voices kind of stuck. Mm-hmm. And I would think, maybe I shouldn't do these things, like that their voices were louder than my peers, right? But this book argues that there was a moment, especially in the United States, like after the 60s, where peer orientation has become the norm. Even parents listen to their children about decisions, making decisions versus children listening to parents or elders to make decisions. And I thought that was a really interesting thing because I feel like in Dominican culture, in old school Dominican culture, elders, even if you didn't agree, you still respected their advice and you tried to follow it, right? And I tried to raise as much as possible my kid thinking that in an elder-oriented culture, which meant that a lot of intergenerational gatherings, a lot of intergenerational meals, right? Even if it wasn't family, because I lived in Texas, and I lived in Pittsburgh away from my family. But I said, okay, my friends, he will sit with us and talk with us, even if he felt bored. Because those connections between elders and children are so essential. You can adopt a grandmother. You can adopt a tia, right? And I always think like, why don't we do that more? Everybody needs more connection, like we shouldn't be separated based on generation.
I absolutely agree. We just had a big family reunion of sorts, and I felt so bad that there was only one 14-year-old in the group, only one teenager, and he just kind of sat by himself. In fact, he sat underneath the tree. And I was like, right, come here, kid, come here, talk to him.
Yes. And that's part of our job too, right? Like sometimes you'll see the lone kid and they're bored, but it's also because they're not being engaged, right? And that's something very much that I find surprising because that's not true in my culture, like in my family culture. And I'm not saying this is Dominican culture. I'm just saying in my family culture, if there's a kid there, we're engaging them. Right. We're treating them like they are a being in the world and they're part of this conversation because even if, a 16-year-old can't vote, I'm still talking to my 16-year-olds as if they could vote. Like, let's talk about what you think because it matters. Right. So, I do think that, yes, it's really, really important. And I hope people do it more. And I feel like this book, Angelica and La Guira, really does inspire. Like I was like, this was important for me. It was important for Luz, like that we show like that this kid, even though they're doing something that everyone's kind of like, what are you doing? Like, we don't understand what you're doing. Get out of our space. Them doing it. Everyone was like, wait, we're listening now. Let's dance with you. Let's play with you. It's a tiny book, but I think it's doing a lot of work in that way.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. We should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Angelica and La Guira and also find out more about you and your adult books.
Well, you could definitely go to my website, angiecruz.com. That's the easiest way. But the book is available at every bookstore. I think it's in, every bookstore online. I always encourage people to go to local independent bookstores because they need us to survive. And they're so essential to make the communities that we live in great. So I encourage you to buy them at your local bookstore. If they don't have them, order them. I also encourage you to go to the libraries and ask for them if they don't have it, because libraries do take suggestions from people who visit.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a great time speaking to the author of Angelica and La Guira. Our guest has been Angie Cruz. Angie, thanks so much for being with us.
No, thank you, Judd, so much.
Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. Join us right now from the great state of Massachusetts. We could have done this live and in person. Our guest is here today to celebrate her Caring Critters series. Please welcome to the show, Zeba McGibbon. Zeba, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. We like to be totally transparent, as the kids here say. Zeba and I are friends. I learned a little bit about her books at a dinner celebrating our mutual friend's retirement not too long ago. Eating some great hibachi food, and so I'm excited to have you on and talk more about this series.
Yes, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You are a teacher in addition to being an author.
Yes, I like to say I'm a kindergarten teacher first because that is where my passion lies, and that is the why behind everything I do. So yes, kindergarten teacher. I'm going into my 11th year.
You know, I recently had a guest on who was talking about it's so important to know your why. Mm-hmm. And it's obvious from our conversation at that dinner and other conversations we've had over the years that you are very, very passionate about teaching and helping kids learn.
Yes, definitely. It's been a journey, but I think my main why for teaching, and especially being a kindergarten teacher, is the social emotional development of children. And I think that's evident in the books that I'm creating, which is for the purpose of teaching kids social emotional development.
Now, are we just waking up to the fact that we need to help kids develop these social emotional skills, or has something changed?
Yes, and both. Well, I think one big thing that's changed is kids used to have a lot of playtime, and play is how kids learn social emotional skills. And they also had a lot of time to figure it out for themselves. They had unstructured time. Like I remember as a kid having play dates and being left alone for hours, or, go out and play in the street with the other kids and come back before dinner. Right. And I think over the years that's gone down to the point where now I'm teaching my families that are in my class how important play dates are. That's not something that parents are naturally thinking about these days. And it's seen in our schools too, where the amount of playtime, kindergarten used to be, before my time teaching, like 100% play. And now it's looking more like they call it the new first grade. So there's a lot more academics and a lot less playtime. And I think you ask any kindergarten teacher and they will say, well, of course, that's why you then see behavior problems in 4th and 5th grade that you've never seen before, because kids never learned how to play together and interact with each other.
Okay, so I'm going to ask what must be a dumb question. If you and other teachers are recognizing, like, hey, we should be giving kids more playtime. There's too much structure and they got to be able to do things on their own. Why isn't anybody listening?
Because no one wants to listen to teachers. They look at the data and play and what kids are learning. There is so much research about how much kids learn through play, but that doesn't show up in like the immediate test score, right? And the pressure across the country of, we need to get kids reading faster because we want to avoid the slump in 3rd grade. And, we want to get them doing math better and faster and quicker. The pressure from like the state test scores that are in the older grades get pushed down to avoid the issues in the older grades. But then we're neglecting the developmental need that kids have for play. And so the administrators don't necessarily have a background in early childhood education, and they, I'm sure, know the research is out there. But when it comes to like, well, I need to have a certain number of minutes in my schedule, sometimes that's dictated by the state. Sometimes that's dictated by themselves because that's what they think should be the case. It's, you know, kindergarten gets lumped into elementary school a lot, which it is. It's in elementary school. But developmentally, 5-year-olds learn a lot differently than 5th graders. And unfortunately, our schedules look very similar to 5th graders because it gets lumped into all of that together because it's in the same building. So no one really wants to listen to the teachers. That's kind of the opinion that I've gotten from my community online with other teachers. And yeah, you know, that's just the general feeling right now.
Must be incredibly frustrating. How about, and again, I'm a dope, so no one's going to listen to me, but I understand that, kids learn how to read till 2nd grade and then they read to learn at 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. If that's not working, if all these kids are getting left behind, why don't we, instead of starting kids and ruining their playtime, why don't we just give kids more support in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade with reading?
Yeah, I think it becomes like putting out the fires in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. Like it's almost like too late when they're failing. And so although I don't agree with that, but I think it can seem like it's too late, right? Like if a kid's struggling by the time they're in 4th grade, like what happened before that we're getting to the point where they're in 4th grade and they're struggling to read? Like, why didn't we help them sooner? So I feel strongly about that side of things, but I also feel strongly about protecting 5-year-olds and their playtime and how they learn best. And I think what's the mismatch is that kids can learn through play, and that's like the mismatch that we're having, right? So they can learn foundational skills through playtime, and they do. And kids, how do I want to say it? Kids can learn through playtime. And the surrounding like foundational skills of hearing the language, talking about the language, like all this is becoming a component of becoming a reader, is communicating that, being able to have that oral language foundation and learning the vocabulary, understanding the comprehension of really good read alouds. I mean, they learn so much through that. And then building the blocks of letter sounds and phonemic awareness and, just overall playing with language. They need those foundational skills before you can push them to learn how to read. If you're just having them memorize words, that's where they're going to struggle in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, because I think they've done studies that like there's a max number of words you can memorize. And by the time you get to 3rd, 4th grade, if all you've been doing is memorizing words, you're going to struggle because you're going to be hitting new words that you've never seen before. Versus if we take the time in the younger grades to teach the foundational skills and then build on that by teaching phonics rules that can generalize to lots of kinds of words, kids are learning how to decode and understand the word as opposed to just memorizing it.
And we've talked so much about this on the show. And it's frustrating. My beautiful wife taught for 34 years. And, and one of the things that was very frustrating for her was it seemed like every 7, 8 years, whatever new innovative thing that they had just learned gets tossed out the window and a new, better, innovative thing is coming in. And not only does she have to learn how to do this new, better thing that's going to be thrown out the window in another 7 or 8 years, but she can't go back and use any of the strategies that were working so great with her kids. I understand that not every kid learns the right way, but it seems, and I think educated, I know you know that, and I think administrators know that, and hopefully politicians who shouldn't be making any kind of policy in classrooms, but they are. I would imagine that they understand that kids learn differently. Instead of trying to find a one-size-fits-all, why don't we And I'm imagining in kindergarten, you can pick up right away going, oh, this kid's going to do okay with phonics. I have a feeling this kid might have some trouble. So let's start getting some intervention with this kid and help that kid learn it in a different way. Or am I just a dope? I don't know.
No, not at all. I mean, we're actually in one of those big pendulum swings right now as a country, where there's a lot of tension between how we're teaching kids to read and the programs that we're using. There's been a lot of recent research and news articles and policy changes, and it is quite a heated debate. I don't need to get into that here on this podcast to save you some trouble, but we are in those pendulum swings, and the people definitely most affected are the teachers, because at the end of the day, we want to trust that we're being given curriculum that is supporting our kids and helping them to learn to read. And it's unfortunately not always the case, because like you said, sometimes it's policymakers that have no background in education making these decisions. And so we as teachers need to trust ourselves and trust that we know our students and know what's best for them. Like you said, knowing what each kid needs is so important, and that what works for one kid might not work for another. And so using all the tools in our toolbox is really important. But I think administrators and policymakers also really need to trust that teachers are experts. And that's what's getting lost in all of this. We're professionals. We've had a lot of training. We've had a lot of classes, and we are the experts definitely on the students in our classroom and in front of us. And it should be up to us to decide to use all the tools in our toolbox to decide what is the best fit for the kid in front of me.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about caring critters and how that can be used by families or in classrooms.
Yeah, it definitely can be used by families, but I definitely made the Caring Critters series for teachers, but I've heard a lot of great feedback from families as well. So when I was a year or two into teaching kindergarten, I realized the need for more social emotional learning, and there was a real lack for developmentally appropriate programs that worked for me, that worked for my students. And after doing a whole bunch of searching, I decided, forget this, I'm just going to make my own, because that's kind of how I roll. And I figured out, like, what are the themes that my students struggle with every year at different times of year? What do I need to do to help them? And in the process of creating this curriculum, I recognized that students and young children really identify with animals and characters in books. And so I've matched a social emotional theme with a caring critter, with a character. So each month of the school year, I introduce a theme to my students, and I introduce a story with a character. And so, for example, the first book published is Felipe the Feeling Frog. So when I'm teaching students about identifying emotions, regulating emotions, I'm introducing it with this character of Felipe and the story of Felipe the Feeling Frog. And through that, the kids really identify with Felipe and the characters in the story. And they learn so much more than me just talking to them about, like, what are the different feelings? Like, through the story, it's much more applicable to young children. So that's where, like, parents can use it too, because anyone can read that story with their child, and their child can gain something from it. But when I created it, I created it as a larger curriculum piece that was missing in my curriculum to teach social emotional skills.
Where did I know your why, your passion is for teaching, but when did you discover this other creative entrepreneurial side of your why?
I don't know. I think because, like I said, I was doing a lot of research and just realizing, wait a minute, this is not there. Nothing out there right now fits exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm just going to make it. Make it fit the need for my class and my kids. And in doing so, I discovered I love creating things and resources for the kids in my classroom, and then sharing those resources and books and stories with teachers in my school. And then later through my company, Kindergarten Cafe, with teachers all over the world, and hearing how their teaching has been impacted by my resources, and thinking about how I've been helping not just the teachers, but the students across, across the world, the students everywhere, like more than I can impact in just my classroom. It's been really fulfilling and rewarding to know that I'm able to have that kind of impact. So it started with just problem solving of like, I don't like this, I'm making my own, and led to, wow, I can actually really help a lot of people.
Isn't that always the case? You know, we create something, we face a problem, and then we figure it out, and then we realize, oh, this can help some other folks too.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what other kind of resources can we find at your Kindergarten Cafe website?
Well, if you're a kindergarten teacher or a parent of a kindergartner, I think you can find literally everything you're looking for. That's the whole goal. I want to help kindergarten teachers find the kindergarten magic that exists. It can exist in kindergarten, by giving them everything they need from arrival to dismissal. So if they need help with reading, I've got you. If they need help with planning for science, I've got that too. I mean, I've got blog posts and podcasts and guides and resources for teachers. But in addition, I have information on my books. And so the first book published, Felipe the Feeling Frog, has a whole associated curriculum with it, worksheets, activities, parent letters, social stories, posters. I mean, everything that I use and that I know to be successful is there for teachers and families.
You know, the mission of Reading with Your Kids is helping families grow closer through reading. That's why I launched the podcast, because I really wanted to drive home that message that spending time with your kids reading, it brings you so much closer together. But there are a lot of other benefits that I've discovered over the 7 years we've been doing this podcast. Can you talk a little bit about some of the benefits, and the biggest benefits kids can get from having someone in their life read to them every day for 20 minutes?
Oh my gosh, the benefits are incredible. And I can see it in students in my classroom. I think we talked earlier about the oral language development that kids get from read alouds, but they're hearing vocabulary that they wouldn't be necessarily exposed to. They're talking about that vocabulary. They're having great conversations about comprehension in texts that at this age, they're not able to read themselves. So it's, helping them to practice that skill that they're going to need later on in life for reading anything. They are also able to hear what a fluent reader sounds like. And that is really important for when they're reading later on in the next few years, as they're learning to read and learning to read more. They need to learn how to read fluently. And so the best way is to have a model for what that should sound like. So those are all the reasons I tell my parents in my classroom. But I think just the shared experience of enjoying a really good book together, and then you can talk about it, not just when you're reading it, but you can make connections to it throughout your day and throughout your life. I think those shared moments are really special. And I think back on my childhood, and I very fondly remember the time, which books I was reading with my dad or mom, and the funny voices they would have, and, the series we would read, and we'd talk about it, and we'd be so excited for the next one. Those moments are really special. Yeah. And I think, if parents are reading Felipe the Feeling Frog, they not only are getting all those benefits, but they're also teaching their kids important social emotional skills of how to handle frustration, how to handle anger, how to handle sadness or loneliness. And so they're able to talk about that with their kids, and it gives them a shared language between the kid and the parent that the parent might not necessarily have known. And it gives a shared strategy so that the next time the kid is upset, the parent can say, hey, remember, we learned that you can do some deep breathing with Felipe. So let's try that, because they've already learned that. They've already talked about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so important. We've talked on the show. There are so many kids out there that feel a disappointment. They, and something's not going right for them, but they don't understand that what this feeling is, and it all comes out as anger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really important for kids to learn to identify feelings first before you can even teach strategies for how to solve those problems. because different feelings get different strategies, and what works, for one feeling might not work for the other. So it's really important first that they're able to identify and verbalize that feeling. And that's what I focus on in Felipe. And then I add in the strategies as an additional resource.
Now, I understand there's a second book in the series available.
Yes, it will be coming out in the fall. So I'm not sure when this is airing, but I think it will be coming out right around the time that this podcast is out. I don't have an exact date yet, but I'm very excited for it. It's called Trixie the Thoughtful Turtle. Trixie is actually a character inside Felipe. So one of the things that I love most about the series is that the characters are all in each other's stories. And so if there's a character mentioned in one story, you're definitely going to get a story later on, for that character to have its own shining moment. And so Trixie, the Thoughtful Turtle, in this story, Trixie loves to be silly and she loves to make people laugh. And that's a great quality, but there's a time and a place for making people laugh and being silly. And that's what she learns. She learns the impact of her choices on others and how to distinguish between an expected choice in the moment or an unexpected choice that might disrupt learning or that might scare others or hurt others.
Yeah. Fun. And I'm really happy, you mentioned it earlier, I'm really happy that you have taken the time to realize that you are impacting kids all over the world. And that's a really wonderful thing. So I want to thank you on behalf of all those teachers that are out there and all those parents and all those kids that you're making that impact. So thanks very, very much. How many books are you planning to have in the series?
Well, I've written 12 for my students, but let me tell you, the writing process was, it just flowed. It just came out easily. It worked for me and my students. I have it up on Google Slides and we've been using it for years. My cousin has been doing the illustrations and it has been eye-opening to me of just how much work good illustrations are. And so we'll see. There's 12 written, but we'll see how many get out there in the world. I'm hoping for all 12, but it is quite a process. So she's been amazing at that and helping to get the books actually out there in the world as opposed to actually being on Google Slides that are boring.
Yeah. Let's tell everybody where they can go to find out more about the Caring Critter series and find out about all those resources that you've made available for folks.
Awesome. Well, if you're looking for an easy way to get the books, you can get them on Amazon or your local bookstores can order them. But if you want more information, resources, anything I've mentioned, kindergartencafe.org is the place to be.
We had a great time speaking to the author of the Caring Critter series. Our guest has been Zeba McGibbon. Zeba, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. Didn't you just love Angie and Zeba? I mean, talk about fascinating. I just love, I love my job. I get to talk to phenomenal, interesting, fascinating people. And I'm so happy that you are with me. So thank you so much. We hope that these conversations inspire you to write a review of the show on whatever podcasting app you might be listening to. We're especially eager to get some more reviews up on Spotify. We'd also love it if you're listening to us on the AM/FM 24/7 radio network. Let your local radio station know that you love listening to Reading with Your Kids. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, @readingwithyourkids on Instagram, @JedleyMagic on X. Please be sure to check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. You can listen to the show on YouTube. You can also find our Drawing with Your Kids and our STEM is Family Fun videos on our YouTube channel. We'd love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can check out our blog and visit our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read Wall of Fame. If you are a parent, you can use the contact button up at the top of the page. You don't have to be a parent, but anybody can use that contact button at the top of the page. So let us know what you love about this show. Let us know what we could be doing better. And let us know who you would like to hear on a future episode of Reading with Your Kids. And if you are an author, please be sure to click the Authors Click Here button to find out how you can be a guest here on Reading with Your Kids. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. I want to start by thanking our guest, Angie Cruz. Be sure to check out Angelica and La Guira. And Zeba McGibbon. Please be sure to check out her Caring Critters series. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Judy Hu, Stella Charest, Hannah Bosange, Alyssa Montiero, Devin Hill, Riley Oluwu. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.